our COP webinar series. COP, for those of you that don't know what that is, we call that center of the plate. I have for you today an expert in this field, Corey Geyer. He's going to walk you through some of the real basic cuts of beef, the why behind where certain steaks come from, and beyond that, we'll introduce Chef Ram Fama after that for a live demo. So I'm going to turn things over to Corey, and thank you again for this content and this information. So go for it, Corey.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chef, and thank you everyone for your time today. So we're going to start off with the question, what is beef, right? We pretty much know what beef is. Meat from full-grown cattle, roughly about 2 years old. Live steers generally weigh anywhere between 1,400 pounds, which yields roughly about 450 pounds of edible meat. Now, generally speaking, when it comes to the beef industry, there's two types of cattle as far as the gender that actually go out and become harvested. And those are heifers, which are non-birthing cattle, and steers, which are ones that, again, have not participated in the reproduction cycle. So cows are birthing cattle. They have given birth to at least one calf. Generally, they go off to the dairy side of it. Sometimes you'll see that show up, but it's not that often. All right. So this is roughly kind of what you look at when you look at the carcass breakdown of what that beef cattle is going to be. So you've got the chuck starting up along the shoulder, which bear in mind that is a working muscle. So the chuck steaks and cuts that come from there generally have their own style of preparation. Working our way back, or actually down a little bit, you got the brisket and the shank. Now we start working to the middle, and these are kind of what I refer to as the money meats. So you've got the rib comprises roughly 12%, the loin roughly 9%, the sirloin 7%. Work your way back to the hip, which again is a working muscle. And as you can imagine, just for the size of it, it's roughly 25%. And then you've got the flank and the plate. So we're gonna move on right there. And this I think is a really good image because it really shows you where these steaks come from. And we've got an expert that's gonna be coming up here in a little bit, who's gonna talk to you a little bit about the cooking methods that can be involved with these. So when you look at the chuck, if you think about ground beef is really, the chuck is kind of that money meat when it comes to ground beef, but there's also a lot of really great steaks that come from there. If you've ever heard of a flat iron steak, which is a steak that I really enjoy, I grew up and am from Nebraska, and it was the University of Nebraska in Lincoln that actually developed the flat iron steak in their animal science department. Well, you've got country ribs, short ribs, you've got the cross rib chuck roast, the Denver steak, the chuck center roast. Briskets, I think we know what those are. You've got the flats and the points, which are actually two muscles that overlap each other and form the entire brisket itself. In the rib, that's where your ribeye comes from. So prime rib is exactly the same thing as ribeye. Prime rib is just a preparation of how that ribeye roast is going to be prepared. Plates, you've got skirt steaks. The flanks, you've got flank steaks. The loin, that's where your porterhouse, your T-bones, and your strip steaks come from, along with your tenderloins, and then your sirloins, your top sirloin steaks, your tri-tips, your petite sirloins, and then the round finishes everything off with the round rump roast, the eye of round roast, and also a top round steak are just some examples. So this is more information that's a little bit more food servicey, but when we break down cattle, there's three separate categories that they fall into. So at the top, you've got the primal. So that's going to be that larger section, right? So that rib section is considered a primal. When we cut it down to a subprimal, that's where we come out with a ribeye or the ribeye loin, right? And if you're looking at the loin part, the short loin is going to be that subprimal. And then your portion cuts become your T-bones, your porterhouse, and your New York strip steaks. So in this slide, we just kind of look a little bit at the example. So there's a book out there that if some of you might be familiar with it and some of you might not. It's referred to as the Meat Buyer's Guide. So it's a publication put out there by the USDA that basically puts standards on what these different cuts are. So it's a standard of identification. So as you see, you start up there with the beef rib. We refer to that in the industry as a 103. So if you ever hear anybody walking around the street talking about a 103 and how delicious it was, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about a beef rib. Then you notice the numbers go higher as we begin to break those down. So there's the beef rib, there's the ribeye roll. It's a lip-on bone-in export style, which means that it has a bone in, but that chine bone has been removed. So if you had somebody who wanted to go through and cut bone-in steaks, much easier to do. You don't need a bone saw in order to do it because that chine bone, which is along the backbone, has been removed, and it just makes it for an easier presentation. Then over on the other side, you've got the beef rib. That's a boneless. There's a lip on and a lip off. Again, a lot of that just depends on how the end user wants to use it. But then we can go down a step even further, and we can look at those portion cuts. So there's that saw cut bone-in rib steak. And what a saw cut refers to is it's actually taking like a really big saw, like a bandsaw, and cutting straight down the middle of that bone. So normally in a ribeye, you've got 7 bones. So if you do a saw cut ribeye, you can actually get 14 portions of a steak as opposed to 7. So there's a little benefit when it comes to that. They tend to be a little less expensive. Then you've got your bone-in rib steak, Frenched. That just means that any of the connective tissue and sinew has been removed from the top of that bone, and it really creates a beautiful presentation on that side. Then over on the other side of the boneless, we've got a ribeye roll steak lip off and a ribeye steak lip on. And you can see down at the bottom of the screen kind of where that definition of that lip on and lip off refer to. Okay. So what does grade mean? So, you know, and that's a question that I usually ask a lot of people, is the difference between grading and inspection. So when we talk about inspection, inspection is something that has to happen. If it is being produced by a manufacturer in the United States, the USDA requires those plants are inspected. Grading, however, is left up to the option of that production facility on whether or not they want to have their meat graded. And the reason this is important is when we look at this chart here, so we've got on the first column, we've got the quality grades. We've got a prime, we've got an upper 2/3 choice, we've got a lower choice or standard choice, and then you've got select and then standard. More than likely, you are not going to be seeing or working with any standard product. Generally in grocery stores and restaurants, you see select, choice, and prime. So when you look over in the middle, 1 in 33 times when a customer is going to eat a prime steak, 3% of the time, they could potentially have an unpleasant eating experience, whether it comes in that the meat might be a little chewy, it's not quite as tender as one would be expected. Within the prime grade, you have a much higher chance of a pleasant eating experience. And then you can see those numbers start to decline as you decline in grades. One real important thing when you're going to a restaurant, not even necessarily a restaurant, I'm sorry, but if you go to the grocery store and you ever see Blue Ribbon Choice or Aunt Mary's Choice or Uncle Rob's Choice, if it does not have the USDA seal, it's a shield with an American flag on it that says USDA Choice. If it doesn't have that, it's probably not a choice product. There's no third-party inspectors that go out there and allowed to grade and refer to it within these categories. It can only be done by the USDA, and if it doesn't have that stamp on there, don't take their word for it. All right, we'll move on here. So right here, this is a fantastic just kind of look at what a ribeye steak has to offer. And I think Chef Kathleen had a little insight as to what this is.
Yeah, I was hoping to just kind of clarify. Many of you out there, when you go out to a restaurant or you're trying to figure out what steak to order and how it might be prepared within that restaurant, or how you want to prepare it for your guests, the ribeye has probably the meatiest, and that's pun intended, the meatiest section of steaks that come out of that. So everything from if you see a cowboy steak, if you see Delmonico, you'll see a ribeye roll, something like that. When you're ordering a ribeye in a restaurant, you are getting it from that rib. It's really quite a beautiful marbled, sort of fatty type of experience, and like in the good kind. We recommend that a dry heat type cooking for the ribeye because it's has a nice cap of fat on top of it, and therefore you wouldn't want to braise this cut of meat or slow cook it, if you will, to break down the texture of it. This is a beautiful steak in any way that they're calling it, and typically has a really nice eating experience.
Absolutely, Chef. I couldn't agree more. Um, the next one, this is the one that I think a lot more people are probably familiar with, but don't really know they're that familiar with it. So the chuck part, to me, when you start working your way towards the end of the animal, in my opinion, the flavor of what you can get out of the beef starts to slowly diminish away, right? Now, kind of explain that here in a little bit. But the chuck, for me, that's where you've got the best beef flavor. So if
Mhm.
you're thinking about pot roast, if you're thinking about beef stew, or you're thinking about, a fantastic hamburger that you've had, generally you're looking at that coming from the chuck portion. So there's our primal. Our subprimal is going to be that chuck roll, the top blade, the clawed heart, the shoulder tender, otherwise known as a terrace major, and also otherwise known as a petite filet. Very tender. There's very little of it that actually goes through that, as you can see in the picture along here. But it's a fantastic product that I think really eats well and has a number of different applications for it. So we start up that whole beef chuck right up there. So those are the big pieces right along the side, right? Then on one arm, we break that down into a chuck roll, which can be cut down into a chuck roll steak. We can take that shoulder clawed and we can turn that into a top blade. We can put it into an arm roast, or some of them will call it a clawed heart. Usually you're going to see that as an arm roast if you're in the grocery store. And then you've got the shoulder tenders, and those can be broken down to a top blade steak, famously known as a flat iron steak. And then you've got the arm ranch steak and petite tender medallions. This is my favorite portion right here. So this is going to be the loin. This primal, to me, this is where the best meets the best, in my humble opinion. So when we break this down, we go into subprimals. We've got the roasts, bone in and boneless, so there are options there, and then going into the portion cut steaks. So on this next slide, you're going to see kind of where this breaks down. So there you've got the whole loin. Once you trim that and break that down a little bit further, now you have the short loin. So where Chef was just pointing her cursor, right over there on the right-hand side, that piece right there, that's going to be the tenderloin. So the smaller eye that kind of goes right on to the right of that, that's the tenderloin side of the short loin. And on the opposite side of that, that's going to be on the left, that's your New York strip. So when you break this down, you can pull a full tenderloin out of it. You can pull a full strip loin out of it. Or if you trim it and just go and cut it straight down, now that's where you're going to get your porterhouse and your T-bones from. So this gives us a better look of what the porterhouse looks like and what the T-bone looks like. And if you've ever wondered, what's the difference? I'm sure all of you at some point in your lives have heard the term filet mignon. Filet mignon refers to a center cut. So it's going to be the thickest and the best part of what that tenderloin is going to be. So when you think about a porterhouse steak compared to a T-bone steak, basically you're running into the same kind of thought process. So the porterhouse steak, according to USDA terms, has to have a 1.75 to 2 inch or more diameter of tenderloin attached to that bone. That's when it's called a porterhouse. If you have less than that, now that's considered a T-bone steak. And generally, if you're going into the supermarkets or restaurants, you'll notice there's a pretty big price difference between the two. And the reason is this. Off of each animal, you're going to get anywhere between 3 to 5, maybe 6 porterhouse steaks, whereas the T-bones, you're going to get a lot more. You can cut them thinner because you can have less of that tenderloin that's going to be attached to it. And the porterhouse steaks, those tend to be the Fred Flintstone big giant pieces, right? So that's kind of a little explanation on why there can be that price difference between the two. And Chef, I know this is a product that you really enjoy. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the tenderloin?
Oh man, are you talking to me? Or are you talking to Rom?
I'm
We are
talking to you, Chef Kathleen. Rom's going to get his moment here in a bit.
exactly. The full tenderloin. Some might say this is, the prime piece of beef that can be cut into steaks. It's a really, sought after piece of steak. There's only one of them in the animal, therefore it does tend to garner the highest price. It's a little tricky to trim, but I would say if it's trimmed properly, where the silver skin and some of those connective tissue is removed, you have a beautiful, versatile cut of meat. The full tenderloin could come to you with the chain on or off along the side here. There's a piece of, we call it the chain, but it's a piece of meat that could be diced up and used in stews. But the rest of the tenderloin is really quite a beautiful piece of steak.
Yep, absolutely. There's a lot more work that goes into processing a tenderloin, which not only is it that there's only going to be two per animal, but the work that goes in to clean it up and get it to where it does produce those beautiful steaks is a lot more than, say, a ribeye or a strip loin or any of the other cuts. That's why it usually merits that higher price. But now I think we've got something exciting coming up. Chef Kathleen, what do
I
you think?
think so. Thank you so much, Corey. I really appreciate your expertise and your subject matter, experience there. We're going to turn things over live from LA, Chef Ram Fama. We're going to ask that he take his mic off. So, yep, I see he's done that. Live to you from LA, our food fanatic chef and extraordinaire, Chef Ram Fama, is going to walk you through some really cool cooking techniques and hopefully things that you can translate into your own kitchen. So go for it, Ram.
Hey everybody, welcome to my kitchen here in sunny LA. I know that there's a lot of snow going around, and I don't want to make anybody jealous, and I feel for everybody. But I got an awesome technique to keep you warm, and to warm us up. Thinking of, we talked about, Kathleen and Corey talked about all these awesome steaks, and there is an easy way to cook these. Hi, Kathleen. Can you please take off the?
Yep. I was just about to stop sharing that. Sorry about that. How about now? Better?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
It took me a moment.
It's okay. I just want to give a big shout out to my partner, Matt Sasoy, my colleague here in LA. He's my cameraman today, and he's helping me out. So we talked about awesome steaks. Now, we really need to take care on cooking these. And I got to tell you that over 30 years of experience in being a chef, and a little bit of TV show history on cooking steaks. And I even have a cookbook. I literally wrote the book on how to cook a great steak. I'm going to teach you this today. I'm going to give you the basic 101 of the best, easiest way to cook a steak at home. And it's literally not mess up proof. You can't mess this up. It is, I taught my wife this, and she cooks a good steak. She didn't before, and I got to be honest, she's a lot better. So what is the problem about cooking a perfect steak? Well, the issue that we have, first of all, is cooking a steak is a giant opinion. Steak temperatures themselves are an opinion. So let's say medium rare, right? My medium rare and y'all's medium rare is going to be very different. Medium well, then you get into kind of medium well, maybe medium, little blood, but not too much pink. That is all an opinion. So what if I can give you an exact number that you would like, or somebody else would like to cook a steak? And I'm going to show you that today, and a real quick step on grilling. We're going to grill the steak, but let's talk about the steak first. Now, we talked about Stockyards, which is our brand, and I'm very proud of it. And this is one of the steaks that is already portioned. It's ready to go. Now, as a restaurateur of a steakhouse that I used to have, there's a lot of waste going into cutting these cuts. There's a lot of inconsistency. You may have a butcher back there that's in a good mood one day and just starts to give out steaks, and that's a lot of money to do. So when you portion, cut these, they're the exact size, no waste is involved, it's ready to go. cryovac in these packages, you get an extra 14-day shelf life just by having it in this cryovac package. So it's an awesome way to buy steaks as a restaurateur. You can take them out as you need them. And let's get started on cooking steaks 101. First thing we need to do, there are 4 magical steps to this, okay? 1, very important, you need to get the steak to room temperature. Doesn't take a long time. I'm not saying to bring it out a couple of hours ahead. I'm just saying when it comes out of the refrigerator, it's going to be very cold. That cold holds in temperature. That's why mom gave it to you to put over your shiner, because that's like an ice pack when it comes out of the refrigerator. Break the chill off that steak. Let it sit out 15, 20 minutes covered. I put it in this wrap here, and I put it in the wrap so it's protected from dogs and all that other stuff. You don't know what you got now, sticky fingers. So another thing that I like to do is talk about marinades. Okay, when to marinate and when not to marinate a steak. Now, marinating, in my opinion, was always done because we really wanted to enhance the flavor of something that really didn't have much flavor. Okay, if you got a lot of flavor, what's the need to enhance it? I'm not a big fan of marinades. I'm not a big fan of rubs. A little spice mix, maybe. But if you've got a good steak like Stockyards, no necesito. You don't need it. All you need is some salt and pepper. My opinion, just what it is. Okay. So now that I've taken the steak and I got it to room temperature, no rub, I'm going to open this nice package here. Now, another thing, people, my mom did this, and I never understood why. She would wash the steak. I'm not a fan of that. I know we have a tendency to see that there is blood on there, but that's okay. That's going to cook off. If you do want to just pat it dry, that's fine. Actually, the butcher paper will just pick that up anyways. Please don't wash it off. Unless you don't trust the steak where you got it from, then you need to wash it off. You don't need to wash it off, but if you bought it and you don't like the place you bought it from, that's the only thing. Don't ever wash a Stockyard steak because it's just great the way it is. All right, so easy salt and pepper. I use these things that look like maracas. Salt. Both sides. I got some cool stories to share with you about grilling. Now, this same technique is for grilling and for searing in a pan. So maybe you don't have a grill in the middle of your kitchen and you just have a cast iron skillet. Awesome. This works the same way. I just thought it would be fun to show you the grilling technique because it's got a pretty cool story about it, and Matthew Sasoya wanted me to do it. Okay, I'm going to put a little bit of oil on there just because it may stick to the grill a little bit, but I'm not going to drown it in oil. In fact, look what I do with that butcher paper. I just kind of turn it over. Also, one other thing I don't like about marinades is they flare up on the grill. Then you got that char soot. Then it's black, not blue. It's just burnt. And I don't like that. In fact, that's one of the things I like about cast iron cooking and searing a steak is you don't get that char. And also it sears the whole steak and it won't, the grill can dry it out. It can, the heat comes from the top and it dries out that steak and then you're wondering why it's dry if you don't cook it properly. But after this, you're gonna be a champ. You're gonna be the champ of cooking steaks, all right? So once we have it like that, the chill's broken off or taken away from it. I call it broken off. Now, what's gonna happen is I got my grill and my cameraman's gonna come over and I'm facing the grill. The slats are going at 12 o'clock, just like so, right? Now, what I want you to remember, and everybody grab a pen and pencil because you're gonna remember 11 and 1, 11 and 1. So this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna find 11 o'clock. So this is 12. Find 11 o'clock on your grill, okay? And then you're just gonna gently set that steak on the grill at 11 o'clock. Now, you are allowed to just gently push it down and make sure that the steak is touching all of those grill grill prongs, those grill grill plates. Now, this is what you don't want to do. Don't move it. You got to have some patience. You got to be patient. This is what the first mistake everybody starts to do. They flip it, they flip it, and they flip it, and they flip it, and they flip it, and they flip it again. And then they keep flipping it. And this is exactly what this technique is not about. This is what we're going to do. We first brought the steak to temp. Then we're going to sear or grill the steak. Then we're going to put it in the oven. I'm going to show us how to do that. And then we're going to rest the steak. It's 4 steps. Room temperature, what you're going to season. Sear, oven roast, rest. The four magical steps. Now, when this is happening, there's a cool story about this. Now, Matt asked me to share this with you because he found it interesting. A long time ago, when there was like the gold rush and they were driving cattle through the prairie, they used to have these big barbecue blowouts for all the cowboys. And they used to grill these steaks on an open fire. Now, they used to grill so many steaks for all the cowboys that they came up with a system on how to grill the steak when you're really busy. So this is not the technique I'm teaching. This is just a story on how they came up with this technique. So one cowboy would come and lay all the steaks in one direction, but he would lay them in a specific direction. Then he would go off and handle the mashed potatoes or the beans or make coffee for everybody. And the next cowboy would come through and be like, oh, what stage of the steaks are these at? Oh, someone must have just put them down. I better flip them. Then you flip it the other direction. So, right? So now we just went to 1 o'clock. Matt, are you showing everybody 1 o'clock? All right, 1 o'clock. 12, 11, 1 o'clock. So then, cowboys, I got to turn up the hood over here, or we're gonna hear Siri will go crazy with the fire alarm. All right. So what we're gonna do over here is I'm just gonna gently push it down, and then the cowboy would go off and do some other stuff, and then the next cowboy would come through. And remember, there's like 40 steaks on the grill. Then they would come and say, oh, what's going on with the steaks? And he would turn over the steaks and say, oh, you know what? They've been turned twice. Once, twice. Now it's 3 times. It's at 1 o'clock. So can anybody tell us what the next step will be? Anybody out there? Anybody on the chat? Who's got the first one to say that it's 11 o'clock? You're right. Over here, it's going to be 11 o'clock. That's going to give it the nice diamond marks. And yes, the cowboys made it up by, this was, if they turned it once, twice, 3 times, 4, that's approximately a perfect medium rare steak. But that's tough to do. That's a lot of steak cooking. I can tell the steak what the temperature is by feel. And a lot of people can, but a lot of people can't. And this is my next thing I want to talk to you about. When we put the steak in the oven, I'm going to tell you what this whole temperature method is and how it doesn't work, okay? So we're going to flip this over to 11 o'clock. Look how beautiful that is. 11 o'clock over here, everybody. Now, wouldn't you like to put that steak just like that on your dining room table and everybody's so impressed, like, how did you learn how to do that? Did you take Ron Farm's cooking class? And they're like, yes, I did. So remember, you can push it down lightly. You see how I missed some spots there? It's because it wasn't touching the grill like it should. Sometimes the steaks don't listen exactly what you're asking them to do, but that's the beautiful thing about a steak. You know, they're misbehaved, but they're so delicious. I'm gonna now turn this over. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Now, step 3. This is step 3. We're gonna get ready to put this in a 400-degree oven. 4 steps, 400 degrees. Now, this is the beautiful thing. This grill is cooking from the bottom and the bottom only. It's hot. And that is hard to judge that heat. It's hard to figure out what's going on with this grill. But the oven is consistent. It goes all the way around. There's no judging that. It's an exact cooking temperature all around. And that makes it easier to get the steak to do exactly what you want to do. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna take this, I put a little elevation on it because I want it to go underneath. Now what we're gonna do is you have probably or going to receive a treat. I don't know if you got it yet or you're going to get it. This is called a meat thermometer or just a food thermometer. They make a lot of different ones. Now this one is Bluetooth, goes into the steak. This one you have to keep putting it in. This will not go in the oven, this will. Now if you, and yes, you're right, whoever mentioned that, isn't this cheating? You're absolutely right. We're cheating our way in cooking the perfect steak without the stress. You got that right. We're cheating. All right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to enter this probe in the middle of the steak, and I'm going to tell it what temperature I want. Here's the argument, everybody. I'm going to put this in the oven. No, I'm not. Yeah. I'm going to put this in the oven, and we're going to talk about what's going on scientifically here, okay? So here we go. 400 degrees. Okay, follow me over here, Mr. Cameraman. Steak temperatures, the opinion. There's this thing on the internet called Google. If you Google steak temperatures, there will be graphs of rare, medium, medium well, and there's a 5-degree difference in there, okay? Find your comfort. I'm a 132 guy. My wife is a 138, and my mother-in-law is a miserable 150, okay? Now, that's the magic number. That's the exact cooking. So what that probe is gonna do is it's sending a signal to my phone, which I'm on right now, and it's gonna tell my phone when that steak gets to a perfect 132. That's our magic number. That's my magic number. And this is why I'm teaching you this. This feel of, I don't know if anybody's seen this. We just watched a video on it today. If you're overweight like myself, your steak's gonna be rare every time. And this is a hard thing to figure out. Steaks will always be a different feel because different steaks feel different. I did a consulting job for a really big customer of ours, and they were overcooking steaks all the time. And I walked in and saw the cooks doing exactly that. They would be pushing the steaks, and I would say, how do you know those are done? And the chef would be like, well, man, I've been doing this for 2 weeks. I know what I'm doing. That's hard to figure out. A filet, a ribeye, and in New York all feel different, but the numbers will always be the same. So if I'm a 132 guy on a filet, a 132 guy will still be the same on a New York. It will still be the same in a hamburger. It will still be the same in a ribeye. 132 is my number. And it could be somebody else. You just have to find that graph. Medium, probably in the 138, 136 area. But I don't want to get into that too much because that's an opinion, okay? So we got it in the oven. We're looking at it. Now, this is where this thing comes in handy. Yes, follow me over here. We're going to temp it real quick. Carefully put it in here. Put the probe in. 118 and growing, okay? Now that's the bummer about this. It still works. It works when you're grilling the steaks or you just want to take it out. You know, there's science. They make some that the rope comes out of the oven and it tells you the temperatures. So once you're there, once you got your steak to the temperature you desire, let's say we're shooting for 132 because that's my rom-pom steak, right? Then you want to go ahead and pop the steak out, and now we go to step 4, the resting period. This is why resting is so important, probably the most important part. When the steak is cooking, that muscle, which is a muscle, wants to tighten up and squeeze all the juice out of your steak. Now, when you go to start slicing it, right when it comes out of the oven, all the juice is going to be on this cutting board, and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, look how juicy my steak is. Well, That's a situation because that juice should be in the steak. So as it rests, it's going to relax that muscle and absorb all that beautiful juice in the steak. I just had a conversation with my colleagues yesterday. It's even better if it sits out a little bit. I'm telling you, the best steak is just like maybe moments later when you're just like walking around and just take another bite. And you're like, oh my God, that steak just got better. That resting is so important for the steak. Now you can let this go for a little bit. And then if you want to pop it in the oven or put it back on the grill for a couple of seconds, you can. But it's as easy as that. Now, I want to talk to you about one more thing before I kind of wrap this up. And that is, you know, people are probably on the internet right now going, making sure I know what I'm talking about. There is something called carryover cooking, okay? And what is carryover cooking? Now, if I'm a 132 guy, should I take it out at 130 to get it to 132 because I don't want it to go over? Okay, good question. I'm going to get to that after I talk about resting. Now, what this technically is a steak will technically carry over cook 1 degree per pound, okay? Now, if I'm a 132 guy, let me shut off this turbojet over here. That's my hood. If I'm a 132 guy and it gets to 133, 134, it's not the end of the world. It's not, oh my God, it's well done. Oh, I ruined it. You can't, you got a 5-degree comfortability zone. There's 5 degrees that you can kind of fluctuate with that you won't be ruined. So what my thing is don't chase the number and try to get it exactly to 132 or 135 or 136. Get it to 136, and if it goes to 137, so be it. It's awesome. Now, how long should it rest? I usually try to do 5 to 10 minutes per pound. Okay. So if it's a 12-ounce steak, if you can let that rest for 5 to 8, 7 minutes, that's great. If this has been resting for a good 15 minutes, you're going to see how awesome this steak's going to be. Because this is the rule of thumb. The less juice on this board, the more flavor in your mouth. Okay. So here it is. You can see that the juices have come out when it's resting. The steak had beaded with some juice on the top, and that's it. This would be the same if we seared it. So if we pan-seared it in the pan, it would still go in here and still go in the oven. The oven is the magical technique because it's consistent in that oven. Now, I'm going to get an alarm on that phone when it gets to 132, and I'm going to pop over and take it out, and I'm going to let it rest. And I'm gonna just be confident in myself. And look, what else? You don't need to do anything while you're waiting for it. I mean, you could sit back, you can relax. You don't have to keep turning it. You can do some other things. You can make a video while you're doing it. I'm gonna go take a peek one more time to just see how it's going with our thermometer, and then we're gonna come slice this thing, and then we'll be done.
Rom, things are looking really great. I know we're going to be wrapping up here in just a moment. Fantastic. Just really, really fantastic. I wish I was there to eat that.
Great. So do I have time to slice this sucker?
You sure do. And by the way, I love your socks.
Oh man, thank you. You weren't supposed to see those. The wife doesn't let me wear shoes in the house.
All right,
okay,
this is the finale. Go for it.
Let's slice this guy now. Okay, so you can see that there's some graininess in this. Now, what is grain? It's kind of the way the ocean flows. If you had a river, this is the way the river would flow, right? You're going this way. So I wouldn't go with the river. I would go against the river, right? So just think of it like that. I think of the grain as the river. Go against the river. You're crossing that river. Oh my goodness. Look at how it's red all the way through. Totally delicious. 132, exactly like I liked it. We're just gonna push it out just like the Salt Bay. Now we're gonna season that on top. And then I'd like to thank you for joining in my kitchen. Me and my cameraman are gonna stuff our face with the best steak this side of California. Thank you for joining me. I'm Ron Fama.
Thank you, Chef. That was really amazing. Loved, all the cooking techniques that you have and the quick tips. I think mainly what we heard today was how to prep your steak, how to temp your steak, and how to rest your steak. And the only part missing is how to eat your steak because we're not there. I'm going to turn things back over to Anderson. She had asked for a moment to recap a little bit, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. Corey, your Center of the Plate Specialist, myself as the Senior Manager for U.S. Foods, and Chef Ram Fama. So please, any questions that you may have, we're happy to answer them. Go ahead, Anderson.
Thank you, Kathleen. I really just wanted to say hello and welcome again to all of the Phi Kappa Psi's joining us this afternoon and evening. As many of you might know, the owner of Campus Cooks, Bill Reeder, is a Phi Psi from Northwestern University. So in honor of him and your founding day, we wanted to do something a little special for you. My name is Anderson, as Kathleen said. I am the Strategic Partnership Manager for Campus Cooks. If you have any questions or needs, please feel free to reach out to me and I can help you with finding the correct person at Campus Cooks to assist you. Just in case, as Kathleen mentioned, and I think Ron mentioned, they are, US Foods has graciously agreed to give the first participants and registrants to this conference a complimentary digital thermometer. My email address is located in the chat. It's anderson.dalton@campuscooks. If you can't find in the chat, don't worry, I'll send an email reminder. Just send me your mailing address and I'll make sure that US Foods gets that over. And again, thank you for joining. I'll turn it back over to Kathleen and Ram for questions, and Corey.
Thank you, Anderson. Let me take a look in the chat here. We did see a couple questions related to how long we should rest a steak. And Chef Ram, do you have any other thoughts around that?
I think the bigger the steak, the more it should rest. So let's say 10 minutes per pound. So if it's a pound steak, one, you shouldn't be cooking it. I should be living with you. Two, the more it weighs, the more you should rest it. So if it's an 8-ounce steak, you probably need to rest it for 5 minutes, 6 minutes.
Okay, great. And is there any thoughts around butcher paper? There's a question here about what's the importance of butcher paper?
It just looks cool. You know, it's better than printer paper. I love butcher paper. Because, you know, I got to tell you, to this day, the good places still wrap their steaks in butcher paper. And let me tell you why. Okay, it's the absorption of the blood. Okay, and I hate to say ooh blood, and my wife hates it when I say it, but when you pack a steak in cellophane, the blood actually will start to deteriorate the steak, and it's not the best for it. So that's why they put a little bit of this absorption pad underneath the cellophane packages. Well, that butcher paper does it naturally, and that's what I love about it. Yes.
These are all coming at you fast and furious, Ram. What knife did you use? The question is, what kind?
That is called that is a Japanese knife called a shun, S-H-U-N, and it is handmade in Japan. If you're all still staring at me, can you all see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
I got quite the magical shun vault is what I call it, where I store all my knives and my sea salt hidden from my children and my wife right in there, because they'll destroy your knives. Look here. Oh, what knives? There's no knives here.
Oh, fancy, tricky too. It's very safe. I like it. Safety first in butchery. Next question up: if you're pan searing a steak, do you put any oil in the bottom of that pan, or just the steak?
I love that question. I would do half oil, half butter. So if you want to coat the pan and you do 1 tablespoon of oil, could be canola, could be olive oil, then add 1 tablespoon of butter and do that. Ooh. Beware that if the pan is super hot, which I want you to be, you could start to burn that butter. So you just got to do it quickly. Pan sear, and then step 3, oven. Still do it the same way. pan sear it. You don't need to cook it all the way in that pan. You just need to lock in those flavors.
Okay, this might be the last question. You mentioned cast iron earlier, Chef.
Yep.
How is this adapted for cast iron, which we all know retains quite a bit of heat?
Right.
Bottom.
So,
what's your thought on that?
What I would do is I sear it in a cast iron skillet. And what a lot of people ask me is, well, can't you just throw the whole cast iron in the oven with the steak? But again, where I was talking about the problem with the cast iron skillet is, where's that heat coming from? It's coming from the cast iron skillet. So as you're baking it in that oven with the cast iron, it's searing on the bottom and cooking on the bottom. So your top is going to be on the medium rare side. Matt, they can all see you eating that steak. Yeah. It's
That's
cool.
great. We wish we were.
Yeah. It's searing that, it's still cooking that on the bottom. So what you'll see is the bottom of that will be well done and the top won't be. So that's why I put it in an elevated thing like that. That's why, so the heat can get all around it. That's why it's cooked all the way through.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, I think that might wrap it up. That's all of our questions. We want to thank you again for tuning in to this webinar through Campus Cooks today, and happy Founders Day for all of you out there. We really appreciate your time, and hopefully you learned something today about all things steak. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.